presentations, essays and deadlines in for the next few days. But thank you all. This was organised in about 2 or 3 weeks, so it's been a bit of a rush. But thank you, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Okay, thank you everyone for turning up today. I'd like to remind you all, if you could please switch off your mobile phones, because they go off, they make noise and they interfere with the microphones. I'm Guy, I'm the President-elect of the Debating Society, and I'm going to be chairing today's discussion. I would like to first of all make clear that the role of the chair is neither to support nor oppose any one side of the debate, rather to maintain order and ensure that all speakers get the opportunity to express themselves properly. I'd also like to make clear that both the speakers and members of the audience will have their opportunity to ask questions and make statements, that if anyone says something that is considered to incite racial hatred, or says anything that is unnecessarily provocative and designed and said with the intention to cause offence and is not related to the debate, I will have to remind you what is and is not appropriate to say within an academic institute, and if need be ask you to leave, but I'm hoping that won't be the case. I'm going to read out the Student Union's policy on the matter. The Union is committed to the elimination of all forms of discrimination and harassment within its organisation, both in relation to its members and guests, and in the provision of its service. The Union will strive to achieve the following: equality of opportunity for all of the terms of its members and guests, and advancement within the SU regardless of race, colour, ethnic origin, nationality, age, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, parental status, mental or physical health, and or ability, or religious and political beliefs and affiliation. Secondly, that individuals are treated in a fair, equitable and consistent manner, and are given the opportunity to fulfil their potential, and that everyone has the opportunity to see properly. So as such, anyone who does cause any disturbances to any of the speakers who are speaking are going to be breaking the Students' Union Constitution, and that's not going on. As such, I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have with us today Douglas Murray, who is author and journalist, who has written for Spectator and the Wall Street Journal. Thank you very much, Douglas Murray. We also have Mr. Sam Westrock, who's the director of the Institute for Middle East Democracy. And on the no panel, we have Mr. Mark MacDonald, who's the Vice Chair of Labour Friends of Palestine and also a human rights barrister. And we also have Mr. Samet Habib, who is the founder of the Palestine Telegraph newspaper, and who has also worked as a reporter for various Western media outlets in Gaza during the 2009 war. We're going to start with opening speeches, which are going to be made by each speaker. They're going to be between 3 and 5 minutes long. Speakers at 3 minutes are going to hear this, which lets you know you have 2 minutes left. At 5 minutes, you're going to hear this, which tells you that you've run out of time. Afterwards, there are going to be 3 discussion topics, which are going to be led by Monica, who is the former president of the Politics and International Relations Society. After each of the discussion topics, there's going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions that are related to the discussion topic. However, due to time constraints, we can only accept 2 of them. After all 3 of the discussion topics, there are going to be closing speeches of 3 minutes length, at which time at the end you'll hear this. Yeah, just remember, 2 bangs means enough time to stop talking, and then after the final, and then there'll be final questions at the end, where you are invited to ask any questions regarding anything that has been said, or express your own opinion on certain matters. And I'd like to remind the audience what I said, that everything that's applicable for the speakers with regards to what is and isn't allowed to say is also applicable to you, and you're here representing your college. So, without any further ado, I would like to call upon the first speaker for today, which is Sam Westrock, the Director of the Institute for Middle East Democracy. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me here today. I'm sure most of you in this room have heard the suicide bombing in Jerusalem occurred about 3-4 hours ago. The last I saw, there were 50 injured and at least 1 dead. So why we're here tonight, I think, is of critical importance, not just so we can understand what's going on over there, but also so we can see a peaceful resolution of the events in the Middle East. There are 2 particular events that pertain to the title of this debate. The motion I'm proposing is, yes, we are too critical of Israel. I'd like to very, very briefly actually sort of slightly change that title, just to annoy the other speakers. I don't think we are too critical of Israel. Israel. I'm supporting the debate because it fits my argument. I don't think any criticism of a country is wrong. I think criticism is required of all countries, regardless of their political system. What I see today, when we talk about Israel, when we talk about the conflict in the Middle East, is I see a demonization of Israel. I see a dehumanization of many of the people. And I see a rhetoric that is not conducive to any kind of settlement, both here in the UK with the troubles we have, and both and also in the Middle East. Two events over the weekend, I feel, over the last week about corroborate my argument. The first would be the murder of the Fogel family, as the media is so keen to remind us, in a Jewish settlement. A horrible event, with a 3-month-old baby effectively decapitated. Purely monstrous, this, and I was glad to see that the Palestinian Authority quickly condemned the event along with people around the world. What I found so shocking, of course, is while the Palestinian Authority publicly condemned the event, their associated news agency, the Man news agency, quickly put out a statement suggesting that a Thai worker had been responsible for this murder. Now, there are no Thai workers in Itamar. It's entirely built by Jews. Whether you agree with the settlements or not, no Thais around. This lie, and I can see, because my honourable opposition shaking his head, but this lie has been propagated very effectively. I've spoken with the representative of Judeo-Samaria who has confirmed that there are no Thai workers in Itamar. And the quickness, the ease with which this spread, this lie propagated, not just through the blogs and various Palestinian sources online, but also through Western media and through the anti-Israeli movements here, was extraordinary. The second event occurred at SOAS on Sunday. It was the Celebrate Palestine Festival. A group of 4 activists running a pro-peace demonstration. One Palestinian Solidarity Campaign activist ran up to one of them and bit a chunk of flesh off his cheek, while another Palestinian Solidarity activist started making Holocaust taunts. Now, are we too critical of Israel? I think this is something that goes far beyond criticism. This is a dehumanization, it's a delegitimization, it has reached a point of violent attack upon those who would advocate Israel. Not even those who would advocate Israel, but those who would advocate peace. I'm sure as the discussion topics go on, we'll delve into details and work out exactly what's going on. But my point is this, is that criticism implies a rational observation. There is no rationality to a lot of the hatred, the anti-Israeli sentiment that occurs in this country. It is purely emotive. I would suggest that the Israel Apartheid Week, which is happening at the moment, there is no rational start to that. That is an emotive, ridiculous statement designed to create the apartheid they claim is happening. They're trying to separate two sides. They call themselves pro-Palestinian. They're not. I'm pro-Palestinian. I believe in a two-state solution. I believe in self-determination for Palestinian people. The things that are going on at the moment, the Israel Apartheid Week, is anti-Israeli, it's anti-peace. It's not pro-Palestinian, it's not pro-peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'd like to call upon Mr. Mark MacDonald, Vice Chair of Labour, Friends of Palestine, to make a speech. Thank you.
You know, I very rarely, and following the guidelines of this debate, ever have a go at or negatively say anything about another speaker. But that was one of the most selective, disingenuous 3 minutes talk I've ever heard from this I mean, we talk about the awful situation, and I don't think anyone in their right mind would not condemn the murder of people in settlers, a family of people in settlers. But he forgets the bombing yesterday of a family killing of children playing football by an Israeli Air Force plane. He forgets to mention that. Why? Why doesn't it fit in with his argument? He forgets to mention that 250,000 people in this country marched on consecutive Saturdays against the strike and the murder that was taking place in Operation Cast Lead in Gaza. Why? because it fits in his argument to make Israel a victim. Are we too critical of Israel?
No.
No, we're not. We've got to be far more critical on Israel. We've got to isolate Israel. We've got to let Israel know through the international community how wrong they are. They have flouted international laws constantly, year after year, decade after decade. As a country, as a democratically elected country, they have flouted international law. Right. They built settlements on occupied land, contrary to international law. 500,000 Jews live in settlements in Palestinian land in the West Bank, contrary to international law, condemned by the United States, condemned by every European country, but still they continue to build. They bombed, and we all saw it, it wasn't that long ago, Gaza, killing something between 350 and 400 children. Now, some, they may say, were legitimate targets, not the children, the adults. But they killed the children. Why? And yet, when we tried to get on television, when we tried to announce it to the world through the BBC, through appeals, they refused. They refused to allow us. We're going to come on to that topic in a moment. Are we too critical of Israel? No, we're not. We've got to be far more. We've got to let the world know that this country cannot consistently and constantly get away with murder. And I use that word, I'm a barrister, I know what murder means. It's the intentional killing of another human being unlawfully. When somebody is extrajudicially executed by a targeted bomb on a Hamas operative, that's called outside the law. That's called an execution. That's called a murder. When other people around him die, the children of that person, people playing in football fields, that's called murder. We have to be critical of Israel. We've got to be more vocal about our criticism of Israel. We've got to make the world understand that it's wrong. And hopefully one day, Israel will wake up and realise that it is on its own. And hopefully then, they will sit down at a table, stop building the illegal settlements, tear down the illegal wall, and start talking on a proper, mature basis with the Palestinians about having the two-state solution that our colleague wants so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. MacDonald. I'd like to call upon Mr. Douglas Murray, author and journalist, to make a speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Holloway and the exciting other side involved for inviting me to speak. It's a great pleasure to be here and see your beautiful campus. I've got an idea already from the opening applause of what most of you think. But after all, this is a university, so we're not here to talk about propaganda, but to talk about facts and ideas and history, and I hope we can do so. The motion itself tells you everything you need to know. Are we too critical of Israel? What other country would get this crowd out tonight if we had it in the title? Syrian government, just hours ago, sent its own troops in and massacred people in a mosque in Syrian territory. But would you have a motion here? Well, Holloway got you all out on a pleasant Wednesday evening. Are we too critical of Syria? No. No, I'm fairly sure you wouldn't. Saudi government's just been pimping out its own troops for the government of Bahrain, gunned down the people of Bahrain's streets. Would you come out to discuss, are we too critical of Bahrain? Are we too critical of Saudi? No. because international efforts led by propagandists at the moment seek only to demonize one nation in the world, and that nation is Israel. It's a huge irony that Israel is and remains the country in the Middle East, which is a country that I would submit most of you and I would want to live in that region. The only one that only one which secures genuine freedom of worship. When I was there last few months ago, I say we're now doing propaganda with facts. When I was last there a few months ago, I wanted to visit again the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. I've been trying for some time to visit it on a visit to Israel. I can't go because Israeli troops won't allow in non-Muslims to visit at the request of Muslims who don't want non-Muslims in a Muslim site. I would submit there's almost no other country in the world whose troops stop atheists getting into a religious site at the request of a religion which many people in this hall and others will think Israel is somehow opposed to. Israel defends the religious rights of its people in a way which none of its neighbours do. It defends the rights of other minorities. It's the only country, I can tell you, in the region which you'd want to be in if you were gay. It's the only country in the region which is a safe, genuine democracy. There are attempts to have others elsewhere. Somebody said on the other side earlier about the intentional killings that go on. Now look, I would just ask you, in as fair a way as possible, to consider the following. Do you think that when Israel tries to defend itself, as any country coming under routine rocket barrage would, as Israel tries to defend herself, if you look at the military hardware that Israel uses, the military technology it uses, the expense of its own troops and civilians that it is willing to go through, does it seek to kill as many people as possible, or as few? I can tell you there isn't anyone who isn't a propagandist who wouldn't agree that the military technology that Israel uses, it tries desperately on every occasion to minimize any casualties. The perfect bomb for Israel is, as it always has been, a bomb which takes out the terrorists that it seeks to take out. The perfect bomb of Israel's enemies is a very different thing. It seeks to maximize casualties, as the bomber did earlier today in Jerusalem. It seeks to kill as many people as possible, maim as many people as possible. The difference between these two things cannot be ignored. It is the difference between trying to limit human suffering and trying to maximize it. And if on a campus like this, this can't be said without jeering and heckling, then I think we have a problem. I want to finish by saying one other thing. There is a serious problem in campuses and in this country with the rhetoric, among others which you've heard already tonight from the other side, professional whippers up of hatred against the state. I think that hatred will lead to genocide. Israel is a country that has been built in the wake of genocide, and forgive me for mentioning the fact, but it is very sensitive to people calling for its annihilation. It sees that from the government of Iran, not just the president and the supreme leader, but from almost every neighbouring state. It is not nothing when your neighbours say that they want to annihilate you. You have to take it serious, and I submit Israel has the right to do so. Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Murray for his speech and call upon Mr. Samet Habib to make his speech, please. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for inviting me here today, and I'm very happy to be amongst you. I really don't know from where to start. We got two masters in propaganda, and just Mr. Douglas said that he was in Israel. And I wonder on what mission he was in Israel. Was he in the mission part of the Israeli Foreign Affairs Ministry that recently has hired some companies in Europe? And it was just in the Yid'u Tahronut less than 2 months ago, in which they are paying more than $3 million yearly to improve the image of Israel across Europe because of these problems that Israel's image has been in for the last 2 or 3 years and even more. To get closer to the topic, and before I answer it, I quickly would like to respond on the two, let's say, speakers and what they said. And the first thing is Itamar family. If it's true what you said, would Israel show us those who made it? Because whenever there is a military operation done by the Palestinians against the Israelis, we will see the family of that person, and he quickly will see his house quickly demolished. We didn't see anything. Israel said only Palestinians did it. And the whole world believed in what Israel said. But can you give us the name? Can you give us the village of that person? Why Israel did not demolish the house? In every event, such thing in the past, Israel is used to quickly demolish the house. But why in this event we didn't see? And about yesterday, I don't want to really furthermore, but I will quickly show you the photos if you're asking about photos of the children. I'm not here for propaganda, but I feel I will have to show you these photos of what happened yesterday. 9 people were killed, and he's speaking about the operation today in which some few people were injured. There is no comparison between what is happening in Palestine and what is happening in Israel. There is one party that's the occupier. There is one party that's killing the people. There is one party that's using the American F-16, the jets, and all kind of weapons against those people living in Gaza. Imagine how you're living in Gaza when you are being bombarded. Personally, I was there. I don't want to speak much about my own experience, but I could easily tell you we were about to be annihilated in the Gaza Strip. Whenever you just walk in the Gaza Strip, you would be exposed to death. And it's a miracle that if you will stay alive. And this happened to many of my friends who were killed. Are we too critical of Israel? I don't think we criticize Israel. There is a legacy that the Jews have been encountering the Holocaust in Europe. So every one of us, and even myself, whenever I write an article, there's something inside me that gives me a boundaries. Okay. Oh, I should not touch on this point. I should not touch on this point. Oh, I'll be accused of anti-Semitism. Oh, I'll be accused of being anti-Israel. I guess every one of us is scared in Europe, not all of us, few of us, to write or to say some of these things against Israel. If you watch the media and what the media are saying these days, you will come to realize that Israel is not being criticized. Just have a look in the BBC. Just have a look in the BBC and see how the BBC is covering the conflict there. Have a look on the Guardian, the Telegraph, and other newspapers, and you will see, and you will have a better look on how the conflict is being covered. Like what happened on the event of Gaza yesterday. All the media outlets, and I opened the BBC today, and I've seen the chronological order of what happened. Okay, on Monday, the Israelis started to shell and bomb Gaza, but the BBC ran the story the other day, directly after Monday, saying, "Oh, Israelis are retaliating and Israelis are bombing back because they were bombed." This is an utter lie. That's what we see in the media. And what we see in the media is dehumanizing for the Palestinians. The Palestinians are being portrayed in the media as the killers, are the murderers. But we are not. We are the people that encountering the Israeli killings on a daily basis. We are the people that are encountering this suffering in the West Bank. And I wonder how Mr. Douglas went to Jerusalem. How many checkpoints you crossed? Could you tell us, please?
Can I answer that?
How many checkpoints? How many checkpoints you crossed? I'm sure you've been fly directly into Ben Gurion Airport, and directly the Israeli Foreign Affairs Ministry, as part of their propaganda machine, took you quickly to Jerusalem. Thanks a lot.
I'd like to thank Mr. Holloway for his speech, and I'd like to remind all the speakers that they will get an opportunity to react to what the other people have said in the discussion topics that are about to take place, and also when answering questions. I'd like to pass over now to Monica, who's going to lead the discussion sessions. Monica.
Good evening, everyone. Well, first of all, it's really great to see so many of you here today, and well, thank you so much for your opening remarks to our speakers. Today, as you already heard about the format, we're going to discuss 3 discussion topics, and after each one of them, you will have a chance to ask a question specifically about the topic. And towards the end of the debate, we will accept any of your questions you may have and direct to any speakers. So please keep that in mind. And the first discussion topic that we would like to start off would be well, as Mr. Habib already mentioned in his speech and touched upon, would be the role of media. And the question that I'm sure everyone is interested in is Israel misrepresented in the news and media? And is it treated with double standards? Is that the case? And if so, what are those double standards? I would like to direct this question to Mr. Westrop. Please respond to this.
Okay, I'll give 2 examples of why I believe there is an inherent bias in the Western media against the state of Israel. The first would be the panic and fury found throughout newspapers across the political spectrum here in the Western media against Israel during, I'll give the example of the flotilla incident. Only a few weeks beforehand, German fighter planes killed 70 Afghan civilians in Afghanistan. Not a word in the Western media, not a word. I believe there was a news in brief of one of the broadsheets, but apart from that, not a word. Now, if a confrontation between activists wielding clubs and Israeli soldiers with paintball guns can occupy the entire world, call it a security council to bear, and yet the bombing, the murder of so many Afghan civilians doesn't, I believe that is an example of an indisputable bias within the Western media. The other example is the incident of forged passports during the Dubai assassination of the Hamas terrorists. Fury in the British media, especially from The Guardian, page after page devotes to it. Comment is Free was bursting at the seams with furious articles about the use of British forged passports. Since then, the Russians, of course, the Russian spy ring unearthed in America was discovered to have owned several forged British passports. And of course, British SAS forces last week in Libya were using passports forged from other countries as well. Now, not a word, nothing in the media at all. How can you possibly explain this discrepancy?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Habib, what would be your response to this?
Really quickly, if we touch upon the issue of the passports and what happened, Mr. Sam forgot to say that those Israelis, they have really got into a country which is out of their borders, and they have committed a massacre against someone, whatever who's that person. Quickly to jump on the issue whether Israel is misrepresented in the media, I have a really very nice lines I got it from an American study. It says that 3 academics from major American universities were engaged by the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago to examine coverage of Israel-Palestine in the Chicago Tribune, New York Times, and Washington Post. Contrary to the expectations of the Federation, the study found a tendency among all the 3 papers to use language aligned with an Israeli perspective on the evidence. When we are speaking about Associated Press, AP, AFP, the major and the very important media outlet, we will certainly see a very obvious bias. Okay, there has to be a kind of coverage, okay, about what is happening in Palestine. When we see those media outlets, the big media agencies and sources, they will cover it, but we have to look at the terminology. What kind of terminology is used? It's always beside the Israelis. It's always.
Thank you. Mr. Douglas Murray, what will be your answer?
Thank you. If I just firstly just pick up on the point that was raised by the gentleman on the side, man from the side. I think you would have to look quite hard to find another debate. I think it rather proves the point I was making in my opening comments. You have to go quite hard to find debate on international affairs where one of the people who was speaking to an audience of academics thought that it was a good idea to claim that his opponents were in the pay of a foreign government. But that was the immediate instinct of my opponent. That was the immediate instinct of my opponent here tonight, because I mentioned I'd been in Israel. Well, I just got back from Morocco yesterday morning. Perhaps I should have mentioned that and sent him into a real conspiracy tailspin. He didn't allege if I had talked about my travels in Iraq or Jordan or Lebanon or the West Bank or anywhere else. He wouldn't have alleged, I wouldn't have thought that I'm in the pay of, say, the PA or Jordanian government or the Iraqi government or anyone else. No. But that's because you see there the fetid conspiracy mindset at work. And this is important. He referred to the fact, he said it's very difficult to say certain things about Israel. It's very difficult to say certain things about all of this. I think it's rather difficult for you I think you have to be careful about what you say, as you showed when you referred to the murder of that family as a military operation. To get to the question, yes, obviously there's a problem for media, and I'll explain it in the simplest, straightforward terms as a reporter. When you report from free democratic countries like this one and like Israel, you can say whatever you want. You really can say whatever you want. The Israeli court system has just imprisoned the former president of Israel, who was found guilty and convicted on a rape charge. He's just gone to prison. You can say, I can tell you anything you want in Israel, as you can in this country. I can say, and I do, anything I want about the Cameron Liberal Democrat coalition. I know that at no point is somebody going to come knocking at my door. I know that at no point am I going to be unable to report from Britain or unable to report from Israel. But, and I give you the example of an Arab-Israeli journalist, Khalid Abu-Tomin. It's not the same in the Palestinian areas, and it's not the same across the rest of that region. Khalid Abu-Tomin gave the example, just finished this recently, of a British journalist who was with him once in the West Bank, who had once in the 1980s written an article very critical of Arafat. The crowd in the cafe recognised him, somebody recognised him. A crowd started to gather, and Khalid Abu-Tomin had to get the British journalist out the back door to prevent a lynching. Now, the fact is, if you are reporting from totalitarian societies and totalitarian structures, yes, you are very careful about what you say, because you don't get back in. Sometimes you don't get out. If you're reporting from free states, I tell you, it's so much easier. And at the heart of that fact is the fact is the reason.
Discrimination against Arabs in Israel. Could you tell them about that?
Thank you, Dr. Murray.
Very happy to refute that when I have time. Thanks.
I would like to Mr. McDonald, your response.
Yes. Just I don't think this works. You know, Mr. Murray, the chap sitting next to me here, says that you can say what you like in Israel. They've got freedom of speech. Unless, of course, you tell the world that Israel has nuclear weapons, and then you get locked up in prison for the whole of your life. The question is, can I come back to that, please?
Is Israel misrepresented by news and media? Do you think that's
You've heard from Sam and a little bit from Mr. Murray in relation to drawing analogies between, well, there was this killing here, but that wasn't reflected. There was Afghanistan there. There's what took place in Saudi Arabia there. It is easy to take things in isolation. But Israel and Palestine, as many of you here will know, is obviously an extremely complex situation that has been created over 50 years, probably longer. Many Palestinians would say much longer. It is a situation where suffering of the Palestinian people, and also, in some counts, the Israeli people, has been taking place over generations. It has been the catalyst for the creation of organisations across the world, Islamist organisations across the world, to use terrorism against other individuals. That is why our media, when something happens, says, look, it's happening again. It's happening again. How many times does the world have to say to Israel, you're doing it again? So is it being misrepresented? Well, just don't take it in isolation. Look at it in the context of history. In the context of history, this misery has been going on now for many, many years. Don't draw a simple analogy with another country that something took place last week. It is disingenuous. It is simply wrong.
Right, now we're going to open the floor for Jews.
We're going to to have 2 questions, one to the yes panel, one to the no panel, and unfortunately we can't have any more, but there'll be an opportunity to ask general questions at the end. So would someone like to ask a question to Mr. Murray or Mr. Westbrook?
And I would just like to remind if you could keep your questions specifically addressed to the topic.
To the topic with regards to media representation in Israel, and you're not don't go on too long with the questions. Okay, so anyone to this side? Okay, gentleman there.
With regards to the issue of when you say that there's a general attempted bias in the favour of the Palestinians in regards to media coverage in the West, just wonder how you can explain this point, considering that, if I remember correctly, in around 2001, that throughout the USA you found an attempt by various media organisations to try and prevent the footage from the attack in around 2001, showing Israeli troops, around 4 or 5 Israeli troops beating a child or a young man to death. Why there was an attempt to suppress that footage? Can you also explain Can you also explain why there is a general lack of reporting in the media about the couple of thousand Palestinian children who are in prison simply for throwing rocks at the wall, simply for throwing rocks at a wall which is being used to carve up their land?
Okay, so the question is, why is there a general... Is that... Which one would you like to
I'm not quite sure what you're referring to by the 2001 case. I can think of one particular 2001 case that is rather an important example to give. Beginning of the Intifada, there was a picture at the front of the New York Times of what was captioned to be a Palestinian student, maybe 18, 19, covered in blood, an Israeli policeman holding a baton over him and grabbing him by the arm. There was outrage across the Western world from the media, again, all aimed against the brutality, what they saw as brutality of the Israeli regime. Probably a few days after, a professor at one of the New York universities, I believe, I'm not sure, wrote to say, "That's my son. He was a Jewish student." And there was not a single correction. The photo was verified, his claim was verified, it was indeed a Jewish student. Not a single correction. No, not one newspaper said a thing. So I'm not quite sure what you're referring to by the 2001 case, but I think that was the point.
I'd add one other one to that, maybe, which is the Mohammed al-Dura case. The press is very, very concerned about what it runs in this conflict. First of all, because it knows what strong emotions are whipped up around the world by the release of footage. The alleged murder of Mohammed al-Dura, the small Palestinian boy, was filmed by France 2 television. It was one thing that spurred an intifada to occur. In a trial that finished in Paris only 2 years ago now, France 2 was shown to have messed up the footage, to have manipulated the footage, and it seems from the results of the trial in Paris that very many people died as a result of a piece of forged footage. So there are very good reasons why the press don't like to show certain things.
Thank you very much for the audience. Have you got a question for the no panel for Mr. McDonald and Mr. Habib, please? Okay, gentleman over there.
Yeah. In 2005, there was the disengagement from Gaza, where 10,000 settlers Jews were removed from Gaza. My question is, and obviously in the West Bank, they want all the settlements to leave as well. The question is, why in Israel are there 1.5 million Arabs with full citizenship and rights, while in the West Bank or Gaza or Saudi Arabia or anywhere else in the Arab world, no one Jew is able to live as a citizen?
Okay, sorry, go ahead. That's all right.
Well, I'll answer it briefly. 8,000 settlers taken from Gaza. There are 500,000 settlers living in the West Bank. Again, you have to take it into context of the ideological objective of Israel when it comes to Gaza and the attempts to isolate and to build what is effectively a siege of Israel, the no entrance siege of Gaza. Sorry. That's why the settlers were removed, I would suggest. The 500,000 settlers are living on the land stolen from the Palestinians. It's under occupation, it's contrary to international law. the Israeli Arabs, or as I like to call them, the Palestinians who are living in Israel, and again their identity was taken from them because it was forced to be taken from them to have identification cards which allowed them to live in their land, because that was the land that they were born in and generations had lived out. It's their land, it's their home, it's where their families were born, it's where their fathers and their fathers' fathers were born. That's why they're entitled to live there. These people that have flown in from Russia and from Eastern Europe and from the United States, who don't even feel that the rights of Palestine should have a right to exist, are building, contrary to international law, on occupied land in the West Bank. 500,000 living in occupied territory.
There's also a million Jews who were expelled.
Okay,
Okay, I've got you, so shall I jump in quickly? There's one point that I really need to touch up on, which is about the misrepresentation of the media. Have you heard of someone called Gilad Shalit? I'm sure everyone heard of it. But have you heard about the more than 7,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israel? Do you know their names? This shows how biased is the media. You know Gilad Shalit, one person, but you don't know more than 7,000 persons that have been in Israeli jails for some of them more than 30 years. No one of us know. This shows how biased is the media. What about Gaza 2005, the question? I've been in Gaza. I've spent all my life in Gaza. I came shortly 2 years ago after the war. I came here. I could tell you easily, and I could debate on the next question about this. There was no disengagement in 2005. I'm telling you. And I will debate Mr. Murray about this because I've seen something on BBC in August when he was even criticizing David Cameron when he said the prison camp of Gaza. Israel is, yes, they have pulled out of Gaza. They've taken all the settlers that were occupying Gaza. But yet, they've continued to occupy Gaza. You control the sea, you control the air, you control the land. So how come you have disengaged from Gaza? How come you have left Gaza and you are taking control of all the border points? You are allowed every single commodity and every kind of food we get in Gaza should be processed by Israel. Israelis are the ones who tell us in Gaza since 2005 what kind of food we shall eat.
There's just so many mistakes coming up that it's sort of hard to know where to start. But look, quickly, first of all, of course, you didn't hear from the other side that 40% of the population of Israel comes from Arab countries from which they're expelled or have to flee from the beginning of the state. You didn't hear about that.
Well, I had no chance. I wanted to answer that.
We've got selective things coming from the other side. Quickly on that. First of all, Gilad Shalit was kidnapped and is we don't even know where. We don't even know his full life. We know that people who go through the legal process in Israel, that yes, people are imprisoned. Yes, as any state has the right to imprison people who threaten that state. Whether you have the right to go into another state's territory, kidnap people, and then keep them in hiding is another question. Obviously, you don't have the same problem with that. Just quickly on this thing about Gaza. Look, when Israel disengaged from Gaza, the Palestinians made a fatal error. They made the error of not taking the opportunity they had to show that they wanted to live in peace with Israel. Because the moment, and look, for those of us who want a peaceful solution to this, with a Palestinian state and an Israeli state, this is an important point to make. It's the single biggest stumbling block. When Israel, against the Israeli government, against the wishes of many of its people, traumatically for the country, forced people out of their own homes in the Gaza. They did so because they thought that if they gave the land up to the Palestinians, they would get peace, but they didn't. They got rockets. Hundreds and then thousands of rockets landing on Israeli territory. If the Palestinians in the Gaza had not fired those rockets, there would be no wall, there would be no blockade.
We're going to have to move on to the next discussion topic, so back to Monica.
Yeah. Well, we already touched upon the second discussion topic, which focuses on can Israeli actions in Gaza and West Bank be justified? And I would like to direct this question to
In Gaza and the West Bank?
Yes.
Well, the simple answer is no, it can't. You know, I should start, and in a small way, I don't know if Mr. Murray was saying this in his opening remarks. Can I say this? I believe in the right of Israel to exist. I believe... No, please don't be serious. I mean, you speak lots of bad words sometimes, especially on the national media, but don't treat me like an idiot. Can I just say this? Well, I do believe in the right of Israel to exist, as much as I believe in the right of Palestine to exist. My concern is, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Jew, I'm not a Christian, I'm a human rights lawyer. I was asked to go to Palestine and to look at Palestine and to teach lawyers within Palestine. And the way I was treated whilst I was over there and what I saw shocked me. And the more I read into the issue, the more I saw, I just thought it was unbelievable. The question is Israel right to do what it does in the West Bank, in Israel? Well, we've touched upon Operation Cast Lead. Simply, there cannot be no explanation for that. But we have to put it into context. Again, it's important to put it into context. There was an election going on at the time for the Israeli Prime Minister. It was a general election. It was an election campaign where there was necessary and it needed to be seen to be tough. So Zipi Livni, who was then running to be selected to be the Prime Minister, and her party, albeit that waters have been going from Gaza into some parts of Israel for many months preceding that, picked upon in the middle of an election campaign to launch a massive military attack with one of the strongest army in the world, funded to the point of 3.5 billion in arms by the United States against the people of Gaza, killing over 1,000 people, destroying hospitals and schools and houses and infrastructure. When did it end? When did it finish? The day before President Obama was inaugurated. It was a political action. The lives of 1,000 people were destroyed to ensure, to hope to try to bolster an election campaign for a weak leader. Let's put it into context. Let's put it into history. Don't take it as an isolated fact. In West Bank, people are kidnapped, people are taken on a daily basis almost sometimes, put into courts, and I've been in those courts. They're not allowed to have representation by Palestinian lawyers because Palestinian lawyers don't have rights of audience. They're tried in front of military tribunals. Children who have touched stones, children are put in prisons for months, sometimes years. People are shot dead by snipers, through the head, through the heart, by snipers, by an Israeli army gun. Innocent people. Maybe people on the protests. Maybe people saying, we don't want you here. Maybe people throwing a stone. But they're shot dead. Cameramen, British journalists that we know about and we've seen in history are shot dead. What is the justification for that? If there is a terrorist force, if they want to go in for a terrorist force, there may be a way of dealing with it. But they don't. They don't deal with it rationally or justly. They go in there heavy-handed. They hit it like a sledgehammer on a nut to crush it. Why? Sorry, I had to wake you up. Why? Why do that? Because they can.
Okay, so from the description we just had, I believe we're all in a situation now that Israeli soldiers set out each day for no reason to shoot journalists and small children in the head. This is, as I mentioned earlier, an irrational observation, and I admire human rights lawyers. I admire the profession. I sort of do worry that there's a sort of a distance between them and reality. I point to the Gaza war in particular example of this. The idea that this somehow was a political stunt. Now, I was in Sderot 2 years ago, just visiting, and the rockets were coming over, 2-3 a day. Every school, every house, every kindergarten, they have the world's first completely missile-proof kindergarten there, is protected. Hamas fire at the beginning of school, at the end of school, to try and hit as many children as possible. They also fire from schools themselves, from orphanages, from mosques, designed to inflict the maximum amount of civilian casualties. By not doing anything, Israel is failing in its duty as a liberal democracy to defend its people, for which government is elected. The idea that this was a political stunt is insulting, especially from a human rights lawyer. It's insulting because we elect a government to protect us, to defend our human rights, and to say it is not justified to defend the Jewish, the Arab, the black, the Ethiopian, the citizens of Sderot, who suffer every day, is an appalling thing to say. Now, if you draw a moral equivalency between that and military action to defend your people, then this is the irrational demonisation I was talking about, and not legitimate criticism.
Yes, and I would just like to remind you to just keep it 3 minutes.
Okay.
Run out of time.
Why when it comes to me? Okay, anyways, I have some charters and some information for Mr. Murray and Mr. Sam. It's from the IDF website and also from the Israel Foreign Affairs Ministry, because I've been hearing them crying about these so-called Palestinian rockets, but they forgot to say how many Israelis were killed by these rockets, and they forgot to give us some description about these rockets, and they failed also to give us some numbers about how many Palestinians were killed in retaliation or for these rockets when they were fired. It's less than 30 Israelis who were killed from 2005 to 2011 in this moment, according to the Israelis. And how many Palestinians were killed in return? Thousands of Palestinians were killed in return. But no one hears about that. All of us hear what Mr. Mark Regev and Ofer gentlemen are saying, and similarly we're having two nice gentlemen today are taking the same stance and are saying that these rockets, although these rockets are useless, and I myself criticize these rockets, and it's only nothing for us Palestinians. It's only bringing some more points to Israelis to maneuver when they see these rockets. It's nothing for us Palestinians. As for Gaza, I don't want to speak for you in terms of emotions or feeling, but I'd like to speak some facts, some reasons. Goldstone Report, John DeGott, United Nations resolutions, David Cameron, all you can imagine. Whom shall I count and whom shall I count? Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, and all those big names. Everyone said Gaza siege should be lifted. And everyone said Gaza siege is immoral. And quickly now we will hear Mr. Murray saying, oh, Gaza is a paradise, as he said in BBC. Also he will say Gaza has a mall, but he will forget to say how we bring these materials for this mall. And he also will forget to describe this mall. I've been to that mall, and also I've been reading what the American and British media said about this mall. You know, it's like very small, two floors. It's not a mall, it's normal shops, but they have been directed to look like a mall. It's not a mall. It's filled with smuggled food and commodities from Egypt. It's full of all these commodities that we bring by tunnels. Okay, we have, as you know, more than 3,000 tunnels because Israelis have blockaded all the borders. And Mr. Murray maybe should tell you something that Amnesty or Human Rights Watch and OCHA have said before, or he should give you some numbers about how many trucks of food and commodities Gaza should have. Gaza was due to have more than 700 to 800 of the trucks of primary and secondary commodities on a daily basis. But since the siege, we get much less than this. I hope you speak in details about that. Regarding what is happening in the West Bank as part of this question, I just invite every one of you to go into the West Bank and you will experienced this suffering. When you go from one checkpoint to another checkpoints, more than 400 to 600 checkpoints, fixed checkpoints and literal checkpoints. And we hear the Israelis that said, as part of the peace process, they've removed something. They removed something, and then the other day they will find the Israeli soldiers coming with their patrol taking another checkpoint. Indeed, what is happening in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip is showing how Israel is a country above law. This country is not abiding by any international law. This country has refused for long years, has refused the UN Security Council resolutions, and it has refused also the General Assembly and its resolutions that have affirmed in the UN Security resolutions on many issues. I don't want to be limited, but the Israelis have refused all these resolutions. I don't want to speak more about this. Maybe we'll jump into other points later on. Thanks.
Thank you. With all the dastardly tricks us employees of the Zionist superstructure are capable of, I didn't know that we could also conjure marbles out of thin air. The point I made, I think, on the easy program you're referring to, was that there is something very strange about describing the Gaza in the way that David Cameron did, given that, among other things, the standard of living among Gazans is higher than most parts of Turkey, than in most parts of the rest of the Arab world. I think that's worth noting at the very least. And it shows the shame which you can see in any Arab country to bring something like a decent economy to these countries, instead of running them as crime syndicate family dictatorships, as most of them are. Look, just very quickly, one of my opponents was annoyed that I sniggered when he said that he agreed that Israel had a right to exist. I snigger because it's about the lowest thing you can say about something. If we were, say, discussing Pakistani politics, something I'm interested in, and talking right out a certain man, Pakistan was created as a state in the same year as Israel. But say we were having a discussion tonight about Pakistani politics, you know, who are you in favour of, who you prefer, which party, which president, and say somebody said that, I'd like to announce, I think Pakistan has a right to exist. You'd laugh at him, you think, what a maniac. That's been a defunct question for decades. It doesn't help at all that you happen to think that a state has a right to exist. Oh, great, well, I agree with Pakistan's right to exist. Excellent, that gets us a long way forward in the discussion. And so I don't know why people do it this way. The reason they do it, as the gentleman from the other side showed, was that, again and again, we don't even have rockets now. We have so-called rockets. So-called rockets, a particular new type of rocket that doesn't have the same effect, doesn't kill you if it lands on your head, doesn't cause the casualties they cause. Look, the reason why you are hearing such poor stuff from the scientists is the following. They are not telling you the basic fact about what is happening on the ground. We're told that the Israeli army likes to, in Operation Cast Lead, bomb schools and hospitals. Do you think, let me know, no, you may in this hall, why do you think it is that the Israelis went and bombed hospitals and schools, which on a couple of occasions, yes, missiles landed on them? Why do you think that was? There was a reason. It wasn't just a Jewish bloodlust for blowing up hospitals, okay? It was because the Hamas, which have been ruling the Gaza as a dictatorship for the last few years and still have cancelled the next elections, and nobody on the outside has mentioned that, the Hamas will not have any more elections. They won't do the PA's elections in July. They said they're not interested in that. They're a one-vote, one-party, which murdered the other Palestinian party's members in the Gaza. You have to regard this as being important. If a state is being run by a terrorist group and murders the other people in the state, shoots them in the back and throws them off buildings, if they're Fatah Palestinian members, that is of some significance. And yes, the Hamas have a crucially different role in the world than the Israeli government or most democratic governments. Because the Israeli government spends, as this government would in this country if rockets were landing, not so-called rockets were landing on a regular basis, they would build bunkers for people to be in. They would build early warning systems for missiles. They would do all of these things. The difference between a good, legitimate, democratic government and the Hamas is that the Hamas uses schools as arms dumps. They do what the Hezbollah did in Lebanon. I saw it myself. They build an arms dump and then they put a school on the top of it. Do you honestly not know this? Do you not see it? Finally.
Show us.
Finally.
Show us, man.
Yeah, then give it
have to go back to John Game, the UN
Okay, we'll stop there, please. We're going to have questions now for the no panel, firstly. Questions for the no panel. Okay, gentlemen there, please. For this side.
So on this side.
This side first.
No other question.
Okay, anyone got Okay, has anyone got questions for the no panel?
Ask us between comment, guys.
Any questions?
Okay, ladies first.
You keep mentioning the number, you keep asking how many killed, how many killed. Why does it matter how many were killed? One person being killed still means a rocket was fired. Why does that justify, just because no one was killed or even one person was killed, why does that justify it happening? Rather than hundreds?
We've got more than 1 million and now 500,000 living in the Gaza Strip. We've been bombed by all kinds of weapons you can imagine.
Yeah, but you were saying, when they...
I understand, but the thing in the Israeli side, they are enlarging things. They are making a huge propaganda. I know every person, killing one person as killing a million person. I agree with this, okay? I've got many closest friends who were killed. I've got many relatives who were killed in that war.
Can I come back and maybe simply answer the question? You know, there's a term called self-defense, as you know. If I come up to you and slap your face, are you... which I'm going to, I promise. Not according to the law, but if I did, are you entitled to take a gun out and put a bullet through my head, and then put a bullet through my child's head, and then put a bullet through my wife's head? That is the difference between the mortars, and they're not so-called mortars, I'm not going to use that term. The mortars that are going over randomly, they're not sophisticated weapons. Some of them are hitting the targets. It is totally wrong that it is happening. It should not happen. The bomb that went up in Jerusalem should not happen. I abhor all violence on all sides. It shouldn't happen. But to respond in it, in the way that they are responding, is wholly unreasonable, wholly disproportionate, and is killing a lot of innocent people.
Thank you very much. Yes, Pat. Okay, gentlemen at the front.
First of all, Hamas established democratic elected. So Israel went to war with a democratic elected government. I'll come back to the latter point. Secondly, how would you justify Israeli ultra-Orthodox Jewish settlements inside the occupied territories of the West Bank?
Firstly, your question on the Hamas. Oh, look, this is worth focusing on for a second because Muslim Brotherhood, obviously, with Hamas is a wing, have big intentions in the region. So it's worth looking at what they have done so far, where they have got power. We may have a different standard of what constitutes a legitimate democratic government. I don't think that seizing power after an election in a coup where you kill your political opponents, murder them, and then never have another election is a democracy. I just don't think it is. Don't think it counts. One vote once doesn't count in my mind. The Hamas are, I have to say this, the biggest stumbling block of peace between the two parties. Because there are now three parties. And you have the possibility of a three-state solution, which I think is a very unhappy result, where you have the Palestinian Authority governing the West Bank, the State of Israel, and then a Hamas state in the Gaza. I think that's a very bad outcome. I think it's principally a terrible outcome for the people, the Palestinian people. I think secondarily it's a terrible outcome for Israel because it doesn't have a negotiating partner in that part of the world. On the settlements issue, look, there's a lot of difference of opinion on this, but I'll express mine. I don't want any more settlements. I think that they should roll back a number, quite a lot. I think that the final settlement between Israel and the Palestinian peoples in the West Bank will not be the 1967 borders. I think it will be something which allows some settlements to remain, some of the large ones. There will be a compromise on others. Effectively, most people know this is the future of it. There's the people who dream of 67 borders and things. It's not going to happen. But there is an additional thing on this which is worth mentioning. And the gentleman referred to it in the question earlier. We should ask ourselves why it is that it is pretty much being decided by the outside world that if the Palestinian state does come into existence, as we hope it does, in the West Bank, that it will be free of Jews. This is a serious question we have to ask ourselves, to ask the region. Why is it that an Israeli family couldn't continue to live in their house in a Palestinian-run state. And when you consider that, you get to the root of part of this problem.
I would just like to point out the democratic nature of Hamas, which is so often propagated as a means to apologise for their actions. If 51% of this room voted to exterminate the other 49%, I would not consider that decision legitimate. I would not consider the reason to talk to 51% and hope to pursue a peaceful resolution for anything. The point is, democracy is about accountability, it's about liberalism, it's about freedom. As Mr. Murray pointed out, Hamas murdered its political opponents as soon as it seized power in Gaza. It has continued to intimidate people who don't fall in line with its ideology, and it tortures and murders its own citizens regularly. It also places them in grave danger by firing from schools, mosques, hospitals, as we've discussed. There can be no doubt about this. The idea of democracy in Gaza is ludicrous, and it's very problematic to continue referring to it. In order to have peace, there has to be freedom in Gaza.
Okay, we're now going to move on to the third discussion topic, and I'd like to tell the speakers, if anyone does go over 3 minutes this time, I will bash the gavel because we're running quite short on time.
Yes, so we'll now address the final topic, and later on, as I've seen, there are a lot of people willing to raise the question, so you've had a chance. For now, just hold on a little bit. So the final question would be for both of the panelists. How do you believe the conflict could be solved politically, in terms of political implications? And I would like just to remind you to keep your statements as brief as possible. So I would direct this question first of all to Mr. Murray.
Thank you. Look, my observation would be the following. Anyone who says to you this is simple is a liar. It's not going to be simple, but it is achievable. And I would put it in the following way. In our lifetime, we will be able to see, perhaps even in the next 10 years, we'll be able to see what I think the us in the panel are united in wanting, which is, as I say, the creation of a legitimate Palestinian state. Now, most, I think, if not all, there are some. I agree that every single democracy there's some whack jobs. No doubt about it. You can always find one in America, you can always find one in Britain, you can always find one in Israel. But most of the mainstream, the whole of the mainstream of Israeli politics recognizes that at some point in the near future a Palestinian state has to be encouraged and allowed to go ahead. Now, the problem for Israel, the problem for peace, is the following. They have a serious problem with finding a legitimate negotiating partner. And since the so-called election of Hamas, this has become a lot harder. Hamas, nobody's mentioned it yet, but it should be mentioned. Hamas, in its founding charter, is dedicated to the annihilation of the Jewish state. It is very, very hard to talk niceties with people who want to annihilate you. Very, very hard. Very hard to talk particular border issues or taxation issues or local council business if somebody's big picture desire is the annihilation of your peoples. So, there is a big obstacle to peace. A very big obstacle. And it is the fact that a very large number of Palestinians and a certain proportion of their leadership, most obviously the Hamas, cannot allow this Palestinian state to go ahead because they have to allow the Jewish state to exist alongside it. And they cannot make that leap. It is a tragedy. I have to tell you, it is a tragedy because what is possible is so within reach. But as long as the Palestinians have Hamas, a terrorist organization, claiming to represent a group of people, the Israelis can never sit down with them. And so, as I say, the will, I believe, on Israel's side is there. And they pretty much know what the final resolution of this conflict would look like. But we have to ask whether the same willingness sits on the side of the Palestinians. And I think the answer there is far more troubling.
Mr. MacDonald, what would be your observations?
you one thing, it is complex. I think there won't be any peace in the Middle East until we get a very strong presence of the United States of America. So I think it starts there, and it starts with pressure having to be put upon Israel to sit at a table and to be reasonable with its negotiations. The parliamentary and government coalition in Israel is dominated by Orthodox Jews who don't believe that Palestine has a right to exist. As a result of that, that's why most of the settlements are now full of Orthodox Jews who want to take over land because they believe that it's their God-given right to have that land. And that is the main stumbling block. It is an election system of proportional representation. Can I just say on the side here, vote against AV, whatever you do. It is a coalition system dominated by Orthodox Jews who don't agree with the right of Palestine to exist, dictating the policy of a right-wing government. That is what we need to solve first. The way to do it is by having a strong president of the United States who has a cash pot of £3.5 billion and says, until you start sitting at a table, and this is what President Bush wanted, funny enough.
You did it with Shamir as well.
Yeah. He said, we won't give you any money. Sit at that table and start talking. And don't start talking in fantasy land. Start talking about real possibilities. That is the way forward. So, then I think we have to dismantle many of the settlements. The rest of the settlements that will stay will be under the Palestinian Authority. Golan Heights needs to go back to Syria. Absolutely. The wall needs to be torn down. An airport needs to go back into West Bank, into Gaza as well. That needs to go back. And we need to have Palestinians being treated with a little bit more dignity. You know, when I left Palestine, I had to go. The only way into Palestine, proper way into Palestine, is through Ben Gurion Airport, just outside Tel Aviv. And I was there with my girlfriend who had come over to be with me, and we've got a really hard time because they asked the question, have you been to the West Bank? And of course I couldn't lie. And I said, well, yes. And they said, right. So they searched it all thoroughly, went through every single piece of item. And this immigration official held up this book and she said, what's this? I said, it's a tour guide of Palestine. It's a rough guide of Palestine. And I said, look, I've got one here. It's a rough guide of Israel. She said, but I don't understand what this is. I said, it's a rough guide of Palestine. It's a tour guide of Palestine. He said, well, how can you have a tour guide of Palestine when Palestine doesn't exist? And I knew then that I'd lost the argument. Now, I'm not saying that every Israeli is like that. Of course I'm not. But there is a predominant part of the Israeli establishment, and yes, the Israeli army, that doesn't believe that Palestinians have a right to be in their own land. We have to change that. The way to change it is by having a strong America and a strong American president.
Mr. Western, what will be your views on the topic?
Well, firstly, I very quickly have to refute the idea that Israeli society does not wish for a settlement and a two-state solution. It is the prevailing opinion of Israeli society and Israeli politics. I also found the slur like Orthodox Jews are all desiring the Palestinian never to exist in some expanded Jewish state to be deeply offensive. I was an Orthodox Jew myself, but I know many Orthodox Jews, many of which I'm involved with, who campaign quite regularly for a peaceful two-state solution. I'm not sure if it's just misinformed or misunderstanding, but either way it's wrong. How peace will come about? We have a perfect model in the form of Egypt. Egypt decided to stop wanting to destroy Israel. The settlements in the Sinai were consequently taken down, and there has been peace ever since, and collaboration. And now that Mubarak's gone, if we do go towards a democracy, I expect that peace to hold and if anything strengthen. And it is this desire for peace that can only lie. The settlement can only lie when the person which wants to destroy something stops wanting to destroy. There are several examples of how they can do this. Firstly, the Palestinian Authority. I mean, Hamas, I've gone over. They need to be there. They need to be destroyed. They wish to annihilate Israel, but there's no deal with these people. The PA are different people. There has been tremendous economic growth over the last few years in the West Bank. 30%, one of the highest in the world. As a result, checkpoints have gone down, things have got easier to allow goods to move, greater trade between Israel and the West Bank. It's very successful. The abandoning your call for violence, discouraging, making the Palestinian security forces work to a greater efficacy against terror groups in the West Bank leads to better situation for both Israelis and Palestinians. There's one thing the PA is still doing, and that's incitement. This is a huge problem, especially Palestinian schoolchildren, who from a young age are taught that the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a document purporting to be written by Jews to decide world domination, is a legitimate document. They are taught that Jews are pigs and that Christians are apes. Incitement has to stop. This is ultimately necessary. The Golan Heights mentioned is bizarre. Before Israel captured the Golan in 40 years ago, every day farmers down in the Galilee and the valleys would be shot by Syrian snipers. They would be murdered. The idea that you would give back this crucial military asset to a side which is not only has killed your people in the past and shown no tragedy about killing civilians, but has promised to do so in the future is insanity. The war, the so-called apartheid war, as you referred to, has said suicide bombings. This was the first in years. You know, the suicides today was shocking. In the first in years, suicide bombings have gone down, I believe, over 92% since the war was created. To quabble over a few metres of land when you are saving so many lives on both sides, as peace concerning the West Bank as well, is extraordinary. It's something you can't argue is not useful. Finally, I'd like to draw attention to the treatment of Palestinians in Arab lands. I believe this is a genuine obstacle to peace. In Israel, we have Arabs in the Supreme Court, there are Arab judges elsewhere, there are Arabs in the military, very high in command, there are Arab politicians, there have been Arabs in the cabinet, there's been an Arab Miss Israel, the Eurovision contest, with an Arab represented Israel. It's an extraordinary thing. In Lebanon, they're denied access to all forms of healthcare, education, they're not allowed to work in certain jobs, they're kept in refugee camps. I think if the Arabs really wanted the Palestinian success, they would have to demonstrate that the treatment of them in their own countries to be somewhat different. I don't believe until the Arabs actually want peace, the United States, the Arab dictators show that they want peace, that anything can possibly happen.
What will be your closing remarks?
Well, I just need some time, as the other has. I'd like to say that it's within this short debate, it was the hardest for me to debate Mr. Murray, but he was the easiest to debunk in terms of the allegations and the lies he said within all this debate. He was speaking about Hamas and having no partner, but he should go back some years back, when Hamas was not in the power, when Yasser Arafat was negotiating with you, when Abu Mazen was negotiating with you in an Annapolis agreement, and you have fled from that. You didn't speak about Oslo Accords and about Netanyahu when he came after Rabin was killed, after Beres, and he didn't do anything. He didn't pull out from many cities he was due to do. Hamas was not there. Why you didn't make peace? That's a simple question. Because simply, Israel is not interested in peace. Having lived in the Middle East, having experienced all these traumas, me, my family, and everyone around me, I don't think that would be a very close solution. I'm very pessimistic about that. Israel is neither interested in a one-state solution, because this would bring it down. The demographic balance would go for the Palestinians. Israel would never accept this. About two-state solution, it would never be implemented, because Israelis have stolen all the land in the West Bank. There is nothing to negotiate about even. The solution that maybe, jokingly, that would be accepted by Mr. Murray, and he's working, as you know, for the Cohesion Center for this integration. I call it integration. he might like accept to bring some more, let's say, 7 million Muslims, Palestinians, bring those in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, those in the refugee camps, bring them here in Britain, and through his centre, he will have some very creative and philosophical ideas to deal with. Because I see, practically speaking, Israel is not interested. Anyway, those people should be consulted. They should go back if they want, or they should be compensated if they want. Seeing all this peace process and all these rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds of negotiations, I could clearly tell you that Israel is not interested in peace. If they are interested in peace again, why didn't they make it with Arafat? Why didn't make it with Bashar al-Assad, for example? There's no Hamas in Syria. Why they didn't give up the Golan Heights for Syria? This shows that Israel is not interested in peace with any party. Israel knows that peace means we have to give up lands, and Israel is not ready to give up lands. And that's it. Thanks.
I'm so sorry to be very, very big. The Oslo Accords. If you would like to come back, I'll cede my time. Just very quickly, the Oslo Accords didn't happen that way. At Oslo, Arafat, who had been a terrorist, who had been trying to annihilate, after all, the Jewish state for his whole adult life, Arafat was offered things that I think now are not going to be on the table, sadly. But at Oslo, he was offered, among other things, he was offered 98% of what he wanted. And among other things, he was offered a division of Jerusalem, which I think is not a desirable thing. But he was offered all of this. What did Arafat do? He did what Arafat always did. He walked away. He missed the opportunity. This is a total misreading of history. And as for this issue of expulsion, which state in the world in recent decades has been the one who's expelled most Palestinians? Anyone know? Kuwait. After the 1990 invasion by Iraq, there was only one authority government in the world stupid enough to back Saddam Hussein, and that was, of course, Yasser Arafat, who never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And as a result, when the Kuwaiti government got its state back, it expelled every Palestinian from Kuwaiti territory. Now, pardon me, but if we're hearing 6 decades on all of this stuff about the right to return to England in the 1940s, why not them? There's a reason. Because when Israel does it, it interests certain people.
As I earlier said, it was the hardest to debate, but again the easiest to debunk. He just told us some mistakes when he said that an Oslo agreement that with 99% of the land were offered to Arafat. That's a lie, man. Could you tell them what happened? This was not happened in Oslo. This happened, according to the Israelis, in Camp David, when Barack and Clinton were in the office. So you've told us a mistake. This shows us that we should not believe in your view and what you say, because you tell us mistakes, man.
Okay, has anyone from the floor got any questions?
We've been waiting for like 5 minutes.
There you go. Yes, you.
Okay, well, you both mentioned the position of Orthodox Jews in the question, which I think is quite interesting, given that we are analyzing quite extreme case. Well, some of you mentioned that Orthodox Jews are not supportive of Israel, of Palestine.
Can I just clarify to speak that we're talking about political objectives, not religious objectives? So if this
Well, yes,
be
well, they have political objectives.
if this gave you a religious question,
Well, I also have to tell you that some Orthodox Jews, there are different views. Argue that Israel should be dismantled. That the land should be given to Palestinians. So I should tell you that there are different views amongst Orthodox Jews. So you cannot just generalize and say that Orthodox Jews are for the preservation of the state of Israel. That is.
Can I come back on
Which were the question directed towards which side?
Well, I was quite making.
Okay, so yes.
I agree. I was refuting the generalisation. I'm saying that not all Orthodox. I understand it could have been speaking, but I don't know. The point is that there is a great deal of diversity in the society, and that the majority of Orthodox Jews do not want to destroy any homes or streets or Palestinian state. The majority of the ultra-Orthodox side of the question, there are different, again, balances. In terms of ultra-Orthodox Jews against Israel, anti-Zionist Jews, the tiny Secretary Carter, who are despicable people. They of course went to Ahmadinejad's Holocaust denial conference, and only 5-6 weeks ago, the head, Aaron Cohen, here in the UK, was due to speak at the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, the LSE. And I think this sums up the emotive, visceral rhetoric and nature by which the PSA pursue their objectives. Aaron Cohen is not a Holocaust denier. He believes the Holocaust victims deserved it. And this is the kind of people we're dealing with. So I don't care what...
If this debate is not going to be chaired properly, I'm just going to talk over.
If you want to undermine the chair, you can leave, but please, try and stick to the running, and we're going to let everyone try and speak appropriately and in turn, and make sure it's fair and balanced. So please, go ahead.
One of my concerns, and my concern this morning, is the ranting and the raving that we sometimes get from Douglas Murray. He's proud of it, he does it often, particularly on Question Time or Newsnight.
Can we please just cut out the personal side that's going on? The debate is about Israel and whether it's
Let me finish. I think it's quite important that we talk about the issue, and you raise the issue in relation to the Orthodox Jews. You know, anyone who saw the Louis Theroux program in relation to settlements and read into the settled land and talking, I don't know if many of you saw it here, will see some of the outrageous comments and views that were taken part with those who are living on settlements. And there are now many thousands that are living there. And they have a political party, and it is the politics that I'm talking about. They have a political party. Those are the people that I have concerns with. Let's not try, and I think it may have been a misunderstanding of what I was saying. I certainly wasn't casting all the light on all the Jews. But there are a particular right-wing, ultra-Orthodox, Jewish orthodoxy that does not believe in the right of Palestine to exist. And they do have a very strong dominant power within the coalition government. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move on to the ending speeches of all of the speakers, and then we'll have more, and then we'll open the discussion to the floor. So we're going to go in the reverse order from the opening speeches. The first speaker is going to be Mr. Samin Habib, please. Thank you.
As you know, we've been debating here for almost, more than an hour. You've seen what the other friends here have said. The State of Israel, this State of Israel has launched many wars against its neighbors, and some would argue and would say, oh no, the Arab armies came and they have started to fight Israel. They have fought in 1956 against the Egyptians with the alliance of the Britons and the French. Then they have they've committed the massacre in Khan Yunis in Gaza City. They've killed more than 250 people. And then in 1967, they have launched the war against Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Later on, they have committed many massacres in the 70s across Europe against some Palestinians, assassinations. Later on, they have committed many massacres in Lebanon. They have committed many massacres in Sabra and Shatila. And later on, they have hardly killed the Palestinians when the first Intifada happened. And later on, the second Intifada in 2000 happened. And then we started to see how cruel the Israelis were when they were killing us, the Palestinians. They were hardly killing us, using all the weapons, disproportionate power. They were using all kind of weapons against us. Okay, and you've seen what happened in Gaza war. How many people were killed? More than 1,500, mostly children and women. And according to the UN, no schools were used by Hamas to fire rockets. Not according to me. You have all these facts, and it's you who judge, and it's you who will determine who's right and who's wrong. Thanks.
Speech, I call upon Mr. Moe.
I hope I didn't rant and rave tonight. Unless by the other side, I tried not to. But let me just, without ranting or raving, answer some of the points that came up. The Louis Theroux program was answered. I don't know, I just don't think that's a useful guide to things. The last Louis Theroux programme I saw was about Paul Daniels. He came out in a pretty bad light, but I don't think that means that all magicians or all Brits are represented by Paul Daniels in it. I mean, come on, let's at least talk about the reality and the history that's going on. You just heard from the previous speaker, a classic example, by the way, of what I'm going to attribute good motives to him. I'm going to be benevolent and assume that he's speaking without any ill intent. But what you've just heard then, in that case, is a classic example of bad history from somebody who's had to live in a totalitarian society. I was in Egypt a few months back, and I saw a great example of this. When there's the 8th of October city, and there's an 8th of October road, and I said to an Egyptian friend, "What's all this 8th of October business going on?" He said, in a very, very educated guy, "Oh, that's because of our victory over the Israelis." I went, "Your what?" "Yes, our victory over the Israelis." "When was that?" I had to say, no, the Israelis beat Egypt. Really? I didn't know that. The fact is that if you live in a society which controls what you think, you can come out with real crap. Quickly, Sri Lanka hasn't come up tonight, but I would love to know if there's any society here or anyone else is doing something about we're too critical or not critical enough of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, when it put down its terrorist problem with Tamil tigers more than a year ago, massacred tens of thousands of people. The press were kept out. The press didn't moan about it. They just stayed away. Well, that's how some states operate. It's not how Israel operates. But you do, again, have to ask yourself, why this constant focus on what Israel does in this? The fact is that Israel, the land that Israel is on, is a too much promised land. It's been promised by too many, I believe, fake deities, too many people through fake religious books. And the fact is, if you read the history of that land, it's a terrible, terrible thing. Too many people think that God tells them to settle there. And so there's a God problem, a God congestion problem in the area. I think the best way this is sorted out is to take God out of it, take out divine claims, because they're all counter to each other. We've heard a lot about history, or a bit of it anyway. And we can always dispute history. But let's just look for a second about the future. The future, as I see it, will be, as I've said repeatedly, the Palestinian state will be created, and I hope it is. And I hope that it has international support. But it can, I repeat, only be created if it recognizes that an Israeli state with a Jewish identity also exists alongside it. That remains now, as it has been for years, the biggest stumbling block. And one quick thing, thank you. The reference that has been made repeatedly to the international law. I mean, now I don't know. I just don't like this view of history and the view of the future. That instead of armies and so on, we'll just parade international lawyers to sort out all problems. I mean, it works up to a point, but there are also things that are extra legal problems that lawyers can't deal with. There are problems when the people's security is threatened, when lawyers aren't the answer, and the international community, very quickly, and the UN is the reason for Israel to feel very concerned. Because since 1975, its policy has been anti the existence of the state. That is a problem, and that is one of the things that's going to stop.
Thank you so much, Mr. I'd like to call upon Mr. Mark McDonald, please. Thank you.
You know, as an international lawyer, I think that I can solve all the world's problems. Of course I can, and look at international law. I would slightly disagree with my comrade on the left here and say that I think there are many people within Israel who do want peace. And I think we have to separate the Israeli government from the people of Israel. I've talked about the unusual and quite problematic voting system within Israel, but it produces a government that's very polarised. When we talk about being polarised, just as a side issue here, I've debated this issue a few times, predominantly and mainly against the Israeli embassy. And they've always been very cheerful, albeit a very obviously depressing and sometimes quite emotive subject, but we've always been able to come away shaking hands. The reason why is because we haven't tried to be too polarised with the issue. And that's what I've tried to do, in a way, is try not to be so polarised on the issue, because being polarised solves nothing. Being in one camp or the other doesn't. And so what the Israeli embassy, when I've debated them, has recognised on a number of occasions, is that Israel has got it wrong on a number of occasions. What I've heard on my left-hand side is an almost denial of anything bad about Israel. And that's a shame, because when you polarise yourself like that, and there's a tendency then for the other one to react, is that what you get is two very emotive discussions, and really not much constructive discussion. So I've only got a couple of minutes to try and have a constructive discussion on the issue of the Middle East process, which has lasted 60 years. Bear with me. Two-state solution, the days of the two-state solution is running out. We're in the last dying seconds of it. The only way that we can force a one-state solution may never happen, because I can't imagine either side agreeing to it happening. The only solution is a two-state solution. But we have to do something about it, and we have to do something now. And the way to do it is to try and be constructive, and try and be fair, and raise arguments where arguments need to be raised, and be critical when it needs to be critical. Don't try and be totally 100% pro-Israeli. Don't try and be 100% pro-Palestine. It achieves nothing. There are serious problems going on in Gaza. We've got to raise that issue. We've also got to talk about Hamas. Now, it's hard for Hamas to turn around on the one hand and see that its brothers and its sisters are being killed by Israeli jets, but on the other hand, we're told that you've got to recognise this. I can see that, but they've got to recognise the state of Israel. But it should not be a precursor. It should not be a precursor to discussions. We have to talk today.
Mr. McDonald, you've gone over your time. That's okay. Thank you very much. I'll call upon Mr. Sam Westcott.
Okay, we've heard a lot from both sides. I would like to reiterate that I believe the opposition has presented a motion and conjecture. We have given you facts and rational observations. I stand by that. The extraordinary idea that the Israeli government is somehow separate from the Israeli people, I'd very quickly like to refute. The Israeli government is the Israeli people. It's a democratic country. That's how it works. For order that peace, in order to resolve the situation, that must exist on the other side. Hamas is not the representative of the Palestinian people. They are not democratically elected. They are not a democratic government. They cannot be the partner to peace. We must look at the hypocrisies, the double standards, the demonisation, the dehumanisation, the delegitimization of Israel when it comes to this question: are we too critical? We are not criticising. We are dehumanising. We are delegitimizing. Whether it is pro-peace activists being pissing through the cheek, or whether it is a desire to negotiate with Hamas, a country which wants to annihilate the Jews, I don't think this is rational observation. In order to properly speak, we have to be for peace. And I don't believe what we're hearing out of the other side, and wouldn't believe what we're hearing out of the entire anti-Israeli movement, is anything pro-peace. It is purely anti-Israeli, as I said at the beginning. Israel Apartheid Week. Mr. Murray mentioned Khaled Abu Tomei earlier, a Palestinian journalist who was unable to write in the West Bank because it's a totalitarian regime. It always has been for the last 40 years. He now writes for the Jerusalem Post because even as a Palestinian, he is able to put his point across. When he has come to both America and the UK and seen this Israel Apartheid Week that he's so obsessed about over here and has enjoyed so much, he has said, as a Palestinian, this sickens me. Why are you not teaching my people democracy? Why are you not helping to liberty? And why are you not ending the corruption which leads to bad government, which leads to totalitarian government, which gives no chance for peace. And so I would ask you to go away with this thought. By all means, read as much literature as you want. I'd argue to give an objective approach and read as much of each side as you can. And I do believe that the rationality of a pro-Israeli and yet a pro-peace sentiment will bring you in our favour. But just go away with this. If there is the slightest chance that by joining in with this demonisation of Israel, whether it's through the media, through your Israel apartheid weeks, or through whatever medium, if there is the slightest chance that you are helping prolong the violent hatred, the rhetoric that determines people will be killed for the foreseeable future, if you are helping to prolong that, you are part of the problem and not part of the solution. Just think about that. Thank you.
Okay, we're now opening the discussion to the floor. So, gentlemen over there, if you have any comments or questions.
Can I have your name? Sorry, I forgot your name. The gentleman in red and pink.
Mr. Murray.
Mr. Murray. Excellent. I must say, I quite admire your ability to recall facts about the lives of the people in Gaza. I've got a newspaper in front of me, and it's dated 16th January 2011. It's a publication from the UN. It states that 50% of all the people in Gaza are actually unemployed. 4 out of 5 people rely on the food aids. 75% of people lack the basic necessity of food. And 95% of all the businesses that were opened by the people in Gaza are actually closed by the Israeli government. Now, this is a UN fact. Now, I'm talking about facts. It was actually a bit. Okay. The question is that I wonder where you actually get your facts, because what you say and what I read here does not make sense.
Where do you get your facts?
Very valid question. Very good.
I get them right. I think I urge you to get them, which is from a number of sources. First of all, read as much history as you can. Don't read biased one-sided accounts of history from any side. From any
no,
side.
Where do you get them from?
Answer. The Sun. First of all, I get them from reading a lot of history. Secondly, from reading a lot of current affairs. And thirdly, by travelling a lot and by speaking with a lot of people as a journalist. Now look, the thing you just read from, is that the Palestine?
It doesn't matter where it's from. The figures is from the UN.
It's an interesting source. Is it the Palestine Telegraph? Is it the Palestine Telegraph?
It doesn't matter where it's from. It could be from my head.
Can you just tell me, is it the Palestine Telegraph? No,
now tell me. Tell me.
We're going to move on to the next question.
But if it's the Palestine Telegraph, this is interesting.
If the gentleman doesn't want to tell you what his source is,
in which case I will assume that it is the source which he doesn't want to tell you all about.
Ask the question. Please go.
It's regarding what Dr. Murray started with about you quoted Ahmadinejad and about the annihilation of Israel. Ahmadinejad talks about the annihilation of Israel, whereas would you not think that the actual policies of Israel over the last number of decades have actually been targeted at annihilating the Palestinian community? So, for example, settlement expansion, land grab, the siege on Gaza, the checkpoints which prevent people from getting jobs, freedom of movement, restricting education, the Palestinian refugee situation, which Lamy mentioned. Is that not actual annihilation? And yet, I've heard you a number of times quote Ahmadinejad and talk about Iran and the evil Hamas, yet you seem to have an allergy to actual facts on the ground.
I can.
I'll tie into that, but the other thing that you mentioned in your opening statements, both of these are very ironic points because you talked about propaganda.
Okay, can we let him answer them one at a time?
Well, you can do them both at once.
No, because there are lots of people who want to ask questions. We're not going to have enough time.
It's a very brief point.
So can you please, Mr. Murray, please.
It's about propaganda. Just a quick point on propaganda.
Okay, no, sorry, we can't let that go. We're just wasting time for everyone else. I'm really sorry. We're not going to do things based on that. We're going to stick and maintain to a certain order. What you are doing is disrespectful to all the other students who want to hear the questions. You're wasting everyone's time. Please, Mr. Murray.
Thank you. I hope we can speak afterwards and I'll answer the second part then, in private or whatever. The question on Iran, it's a straightforward one. If the Iranian, as I say, President, Supreme Leader and others say they want to annihilate the State of Israel...
They never said that, Douglas.
Okay,
they never
please,
said
please, let the speaker finish. It's not good. Be very disrespectful.
And there's always someone who pretends they don't say what comes out of their mouths. White from the face of time, whatever your particular transliteration you want to
you have sufficient knowledge of English. I mean, you're an English speaker, you can understand.
Your fellow students who want to listen to this answer.
Is the following. Is that whilst pursuing nuclear weaponry, that is certainly something which Israel should be concerned about. Secondly, on the issue, no, I don't think it's anything like an annihilation. Look, it's referred already that Israel is a nuclear state, okay? Mordechai Vanunu, the whistleblower, went to prison for revealing this many decades ago, as this country imprisons people who release our secrets and our intelligence information. Now look, let's just be real about this. If Israel wanted to annihilate the Palestinian people, it could, but it doesn't. It doesn't. It's simply a fact on the ground. Go to the West Bank, go to Israel, speak to Palestinians in Israel. Is it annihilating them? Or is it giving them all the rights of every other citizen?
What's the
It's
Jewish
the latter.
oath of loyalty? What is the Jewish oath of loyalty then?
This is
How
a
is that freedom?
fantasy concept. That Israel is engaged in annihilation. And by the way, it is said for a particular reason. A very particular reason. I have to highlight this very quickly. It is always said because the desire of people in Europe and elsewhere at the moment seems to be lending towards the idea that now the Jews are doing it. Now the Jews are doing genocide. It's such an attractive thing for Europeans to argue. You see, even the Jews can do genocide. No, this is a fantasy.
Okay, can we have a response from...
Let me quickly jump on the point that I've been hearing for long now, which is whether Hamas recognizes Israel or not. There has to be a question whether Israel recognizes the Palestinians or not. Quickly, I'll go back into history and I'll see. And I'll ask Mr. Murray, have Israel recognized us?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Of course, no. Israel has recognized the PLO as a representative of the Palestinians, but they've never recognized Palestine or Palestinians as a nation or a state. They never, and they will never do it.
Okay, thank you. I've got another question. Okay, how about the gentleman over there in the corner?
There's a question to that. The other side takes Hamas to be an obstacle to any diplomatic process of progress in the region. This side takes that as a premise of the argument. Is that something that you share? And if so, what are the possible solutions to Hamas's ideological objections?
I'll try and answer that. I think again, we keep on coming back to the same answer. Sometimes it is very complex. Of course it's very complex. You can't just deal with it in black and white. You know, it is a situation where Hamas are being identified, targeted, and in many cases assassinated. When you're killing the people of Hamas, it is very difficult for them to sit at the table with you and to start talking peace. So it has to start with let's stop dropping bombs on families. Let's stop targeting and extrajudicial murders in foreign countries. That's where it has to start. Starts there, and then we start to take them to the table. And yes, like we talked to the IRA, and there are food problems with that another day, I know, but like we start talking to the IRA, we have to start sitting down at the table and start talking to Hamas.
Just one regarding this question.
Okay, very quickly.
I don't want to be a spokesman for Hamas or defense Hamas views, but having followed the politics, I could clearly tell you since Hamas and it's coming to power, there has to be some strategic change in its policy. They have started to say that we might accept two-state solution based on the 1967 borders, which is a turning point in Hamas charter. Okay, I guess this has to be taken further if the Israelis accept to speak with Hamas, but they will never accept.
Okay, a question from the gentleman at the back there in the club chair.
I'm not belonging to any particular religious affiliation myself. I did visit Israel recently. It was just one of those places that have always interested me, very deep in culture and religion. Just an observation, I was staying in Tel Aviv, and a part of, in Tel Aviv we have Jaffa as it's called in Hebrew. And what I found quite interesting was the Arabs living there tend to have a very good life. I saw most of them driving around in BMWs and nice cars. We ate in a restaurant run by Arabs that were predominantly served by Jewish customers living. So I don't think like this hostility, like I think to an extent you're making it sound almost a little bit exaggerated in concern to contemporary.
Okay, we have someone from this side and then someone from this side answer.
I don't know if this works, but I think we get a very sterile approach to Israel and Palestine when you go to Tel Aviv. I think it's a very different world from actually what's going on in Nablus and Hebron and Ramallah and Bethlehem and East Jerusalem. I think in Tel Aviv it's almost like an oasis surrounded by a war zone. And I'm sure you went outside of Tel Aviv, and I'm sure you probably went over to Ramallah or Nablus or went into Hebron and sat in cafes there. But I think if you did, you would have seen a very different world.
Yeah, of course. Tel Aviv is a place with not just Jews and Arabs and Christians living happily side by side, but also one of the only places in the Middle East where the gay community can thrive, free from persecution. To then state that Nablus and Hebron are not in Israel proper, they're in what's called disputed territory, and they're a war zone. The question we must ask is where this moral competency lies. So it's a war zone, it's different from Israel proper. And the model that we hope for the Palestinian state is that of Israel, is that of Tel Aviv, where Jews and Arabs can live happily side by side.
Yeah, thank you. Now another question. Okay, gentleman there.
Mr. Murray, you said Israel, we call them military occupiers, have a democracy. Well, this democracy has come with a cost. 60 years of occupation and the cost of my grandfathers in South Lebanon, and this democracy has brought these, just to mention a few, and I have the source for you if you're really interested into facts, by United Nations and a few organizations in the United States, so I'll bring it to you down. One of them is that more than 1.1 million people, which is 75% of Gaza's population, lack food according to the United Nations, and 10% of Gaza water now meets the international standards for consumption. And also Israel allows entry for only 2.2 million liters each week of fuel, half of the minimum level required by the civilian in Gaza. Now how would you call that a democratic state? I don't call them. I call them military occupiers.
Okay, good. Let me ask
you were laughing at the data. I have the data for you here.
Firstly, I think even the UN's own data, which you can look back at like later, shows that living standards in Gaza are higher than in many other parts of the region. Secondly, let's just get back to the facts. Why is it that there are checkpoints in and out of Gaza? Why is it that Israel is sending in truck after truck of food, and why isn't there free flow? Because, just to tread back over it again, every time there is a free flow from Gaza into Israel, Israel gets suicide bombers. So if there were no suicide bombers coming in, then the aid and so on could be better. It would be trade, not aid. And then secondly, a very, very important point. The gentleman who just spoke said 60 years of occupation. Is this, we ask ourselves what I think most of us on the panel want, which is a carving out of a Palestinian state within this? No. 60 years of occupation. You mean the whole of Israel is an occupation? Do you not?
The whole of Palestine.
Yeah. Do you not think that?
The whole of Palestine is an occupation.
Yeah. You believe, in other words, there is no Jewish state in France.
No, Jews can live in Palestine, but Israel, they invaded Palestine. That's what they did.
Illegal.
And South Lebanon.
We're going to have a response to that, and then we'll go down to debate to an end. So there won't be any more questions. Let's go to this bit, and then
there was a quick, like a flagrant mistake made again by Mr. Murray, and I'm very happy to keep track of his mistakes. He only claims to utter lies when he said that about the checkpoints in Gaza because of the suicide attack since Israel imposed the siege in Gaza 2006 till now. There was no suicide attacks going from Gaza into Israel. Give us names, numbers, statistics, please. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to have to finish there. I'm very sorry. Thank you ever so much for all my guest speakers.